Okay, so the next step of the certification process, at least CalPAS process, is the certification. Essentially, this is where the expectation is all of your data was already submitted to CalPADS, and then the next step is to see if there are any discrepancies based on the data that was uploaded to CalPADS. You have to address any certification errors, any CDDs, any anomalies, and then of course review your reports. Okay, so here is the process of certification. Again, as I've mentioned, you submit your data. Once all of the data are in CalPADS, they were posted with no errors. Then, of course, you have to go through the resolution process of any certification errors and CDDs and anomalies. And then once all of those are cleared, then that's only the time it makes sense to review your reports, because you shouldn't go directly through reports and review them without making sure you have zero errors. Otherwise, some of those students will not be included on your reports. Okay. And then once you've reviewed your reports, again, of course, you click on the approval button, and that approval button will then notify your SELPA and yourself that you approve your data for Fall 1. And then the SELPA receives a notification. The SELPA then looks at their version of the reports, and if they say, yes, we agree with your data, then they click on the SELPA approve button, which then makes your data certified. So two approvals equals certification. Now, let's say if your SELPA doesn't agree with your data, they they then email you directly and tell you, hey, there are some discrepancies, and that's when you make your corrections again, and then the cycle goes back through this. Then, of course, when your SELPA approves, finally approves, it then sends you a notification as well that you got your second approval. Okay, this is just a simplistic illustration of the certification process. However, based on real life scenario, this is more than that. Okay, so let's do a demo to show you guys how the certification process is. So assuming you think all of your data has been submitted to CalPADS, your SENR, SINF, SPRG, SILA, students with disabilities, your SPED and SSRV have been submitted, the next thing you need to go to is the certification status page. If you click on this, it brings up your certification status page for this current academic year. It should default to this year, and you should at least have Fall 1 in here. So the results here will only appear if the snapshots for that submission period have been activated. Okay. The reason why we only have one this year is because we're still in Fall 1. Now, if you go through end of year later or Fall 2, then this would add up. Okay. So based on ocular inspection, you have your Fall 1 here. You have 79 fatal errors that you need to resolve. And then, of course, your anomaly percentage is way, 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 way high. It's 7.3%. So aside from resolving your fatal errors, you have to check for any mids and CCE that you may need to resolve. Okay. So let's open this page and see what the errors are. Okay. So this is your certification details. If you want a self-paced training on this, if you're still confused or if you need to go back and review the process, you can access that in the CC's YouTube channel. I believe it's in the basics training. Let me just bring this up before we go through the next slides. Or maybe I'll just do it later. So go to that session and then review this part. But anyway, this is the certification details. This is essentially your dashboard. It indicates your revision create date, revision ID, the CDD date, warnings, and the revision status. Okay, so whenever you get a snapshot is a refresh of your data based on any changes you make. The snapshot, the certification details will then offer you the most recent snapshot. Okay, as long as yours is in revised and certified. Okay, sometimes let's say you approve your data, and so by default, CalPads will reflect this LA approved, or if your SELPA approved it, it would say SELPA approved. Now, if you want to see any changes you made to your data without decertifying, you just have to toggle between the revision status. More often than not, if you are on SELPA approved, then or LA approved, and you made changes, just switch, toggle to this, and look for revised uncertified. Your revised uncertified should reflect the changes that you've made. Okay? Assuming you have a revised uncertified status, it should reflect the time stamp and date stamp that was created. Now, if you look, and then you also have a revision ID, take note of this revision ID when communicating with yourself. I'll discuss this later in the process, but take note of this revision ID. Now, for the CDD, sometimes this doesn't coincide with your revision create date, which is basically on your snapshot. So the CDD is actually a separate snapshot for your certification data discrepancy. So what are CDDs? This is basically a fatal error based on your submissions. In prior years, I mean all of the file type errors like SCNR, SCNR5, GER5, all of those trigger during input. However, after the post redesign that happened in April, first minimal errors will trigger during input, and the rest will trigger as a CDD that you have to resolve. So it will allow the data into CalPads, and then once the data is in CalPads and the system sees any discrepancy, then it will be included on the certification error resolution process. Okay. So when you resolve CDDs, that then triggers its own snapshot. Okay. I'm just talking in theory. In theory, the CDD should run more often and should trigger once you make changes. And then after that, if you leave your snapshot as is, then it will trigger the actual certification snapshot. So that would be the last date stamp here that would change. Okay. That's by theory. And hopefully that should remain as designed as well. Okay. So this is basically the difference between this and your revision create date. Sometimes you would notice, hey, how come this already updated, but this didn't? That's because these are in two different queues, okay? So also, essentially, we made you guys submission faster. However, the delay is now on the other side of that freeway, basically. So there are times that there is a long delay in the CDD as well as the snapshot creation. So just bear that in mind. Okay. So there's also another option here that you could use is the in review option. So let's say you've cleared all of your errors, but then you just want to freeze the data for a moment while waiting for your stakeholders like your EL department or your PRG, your program department to sign off on those accounts. Then, without certifying or without even approving, you can click on in review, and that should freeze this version of your snapshot while enabling your stakeholders to review the reports at the bottom. Okay. That way, if something happens or if someone submitted a new file and it triggered more errors, you have an insurance policy version of your snapshot, right? So that's just the part here. Now, if you scroll down, if you're part of a SELPA, then of course you will see who the SELPA is that will click on your second approval. Okay, so all LEAs are under a SELPA. So once you click on LA approved, then the notification will be sent out to your SELPA, and your SELPA will require their version of approval. Okay. So now here is your certification validations page. This is where you see your fatal errors and warnings. As you can see, you have here your certification errors, and you have here a file type error. And this is what we call your CDDs, your certification data discrepancy. Okay. So we will discuss how to resolve this in a few minutes. Let's first go down here. So let's say you've cleared all of your errors. Then of course, it makes sense to go and review your reports. So once you've cleared errors, waited for a new snapshot, and the snapshot brought down your fatal errors to 0, then that's the only time you scroll here and review your certification reports. Your cert reports are, you have here aggregate, and you have here additional supporting reports. So for CalPAS to allow you to certify, the minimum requirements for you to review is your aggregate reports here. Once you've reviewed this and all of this red X is turned to a green, a small button will appear here saying, hey, your data is ready. If you check this box, you're saying that you're signing your life away and to CalPads. And if you check that, then that's the only time when your LEA approval button will appear here. Okay. So, however, it doesn't make sense for you guys to just look at the counts. You also have to look at the student list, right? To see if all of your students are accounted for. So review all of this as well, and then review this as well. So once you have all green marks, then you should be able to approve it. And then that's when your SELPA will be notified of your approval, and that would then trigger them to review your reports on their end, which I will demo in a few minutes. Okay. And then at the bottom here is your snapshot history. This is just a summary of your progression with regards to resolving errors, or when you certified, decertified, approved, disapproved. All of these are in here. So it also then shows you the revision ID, which is key when communicating with yourself, right? So for us, CSIS monitors, the ones who are in charge of making sure a group of LEAs are certified in time, we normally use this as a reference point to see if you're making progress. Okay. So if we email you guys and remind you, hey, what's up? Then that's because we look at all of your errors. Okay, so that's just the overview and description of the certification details. Let's now first go and resolve errors. Okay, certification errors and CDDs are errors based on data you already have in CalPads. This is different from your IVRs or your submission errors. Your submission errors that you see here under view submission, those are errors based on data you have in your file. Okay, just to be sure, just to be clear, this is based on data that you submitted based on your file in CalPads, or the file that you extracted from your SIS or say SEDS vendor. Okay, this, however, is based on the data you already have in CalPads. So the CalPad system creates another process of validations to check if it meets certain criteria that would then be meet guidelines for to be included on the different subgroups that I've mentioned earlier in this session. Okay. Okay. So here are your errors. So for those of you who still see a cert 1 is essentially saying that you have a school that is expected to submit data for this academic year, but CalPAS hasn't seen any yet. You haven't submitted any SENR, SINF, and all of those good stuff. So the question is your school still operating, or is your school an active school, however, you don't have any enrollments this year up to census day? If that's the case, then the resolution for this, you just click on this and go to CalPAS user manual, cert 1, and test is slow, and scroll down. So here are your resolution, okay? So again, before even going to certification, just like any troubleshooting process that we've mentioned during data population, it is important that you know the different documents that you have to have by your side. Okay, if you scroll down here, you have the data guide, you have the error list, which brings us to the error page. You have the known issues list, okay, to know if there are any existing issues with any cert errors. And then you have the valid code if you have any EL errors. Okay, so those are just basic documents that you should have handy. That way, if you before resolving errors. Okay, so now if you click on Cert 1 is essentially saying that you don't have any data reported for school this year. So there are three scenarios that we perceive normally happens. Number one, there is an active school with students enrolled on or before census day or any point during the academic year. If that's the case, if you have enrolled students, then to resolve the issue is to submit data to CalPADS. All right. Number two, the school is active, but there is no enrollment to CalPADS, right? Because there are no students enrolled this year. If that's the case, you have to send us a ticket saying, hey, we don't have enrollments this year. Could you take off our school from the expected schools table? That way, once CDE takes the school out, it won't trigger a cert 1 error in CalPADS. Okay? And then, of course, if the school closed mid-year, then, of course, you have to send out an update to the Opus website to tell us that school is closed. Okay? And there is some documentation here that you could use to be able to do that process. Okay? And then once that process is updated in the Opus website, then that table will also be translated into CalPADS, and that should take off your school from this list. So what's the takeaway here? The takeaway is if you have a cert 1, you have to act on it right away. Don't wait till the deadline. Because if your scenario is 2 or 3, it takes forever to clear that error. So send that ticket now if you have a cert 1, and that way we can process it before that at least LA approval week, which is on December 17th. Okay. Okay. So cert 4. Cert 4, a student has no ethnicity or race data. Okay, let's click on show. Cert 4 happens when, of course, you have, open that, you submitted the SENR, you submitted the SINF, but then there are essential race and ethnicity data missing. Okay, so let's click on show. Thought I clicked on show. Oh, it's still spinning. Okay, so for here, we have cert 4. You have the submission period, because cert 4 also triggers in end of year if you are in the end of year period, or I believe in fall 2 as well. So it identifies what submission period is this. And then if we have active defects, it also identifies that here. This is the good thing about going to the CalPADS user manual. It puts both, or clicking on that button, it puts both the error list and the known issues list in one page. And it provides you additional information like the cert one that isn't in the error list. Okay, if you're relying on the spreadsheets before, you may want to check this feature in CalPads. Okay, of course, CalPads is being CalPads in test 2, Nate. Oh man. Okay, while waiting for that, let's just refer to Cert 40. Cert 40 is essentially saying that your SSID anomalies is above the 2% threshold. Your SSID anomalies that trigger Cert 40 is based on any CCEs, concurrent enrollments, or MIDs. If you have a lot of MID and you have concurrent enrollments, and it accounts for 2% of your enrollment, then of course it would trigger a Cert 40. So you have to resolve that as well. How to resolve MIDs? You just go to online maintenance, go to anomalies management, and go to the MID interface here. There is also a self-paced video that would help you with, with resolving this. And in the user manual, there is, where is that? You just go to the user manual and go to the mid resolution section. You just type mids here or go here to functionality map. The functionality map just mimics the different sections you have in CalPad. So just follow along with, just follow this dashboard here, and you should also do that on the user manual. There are videos here in the CC YouTube channel that would help you with that. Should I throw that in here section? So if you go to the CalPad YouTube channel and you want to see videos of those, go here to the CC's YouTube videos. There are some certification errors that you could refer to. So you have here certification errors. So you have Cert 4s, all of those basic common errors are available for to help you guys with resolution on your cert errors. So let's back here. There we go. So now we have Cert 4. Again, if you click on this, it should bring up the same link to the user manual, and then you can click on this. So for Cert 4, it says here, error description, student has no ethnicity and race data. So you have to go to the SINF data to look at the fields validated for the SINF, meaning if you go here, go to demographics, then of course, obviously, you have no information here. So just by looking at the columns here, you have your ethnicity and race code that are missing. So that's what's causing the issue. So now, this normally happens, especially if you have, let's say, 1,000 cert 4s, if you have not submitted your SINF file, which carries both demographics and address information. So the reason why we have here a blank SINF, although you have the birthdays here, is that when you submit a SSD enrollment, a batch file for enrollment, CalPads only creates a shell of that demographic information for those new students. And so it's important for you to submit your SINF to complete that field elements, okay? To resolve this, you either have to submit your SINF, or if you only have one record that's causing a Cert 4, it doesn't make sense to submit a batch file. I'd rather you just go here to the record that is causing the issue and populate the required fields. So you have here, scroll down, race and ethnicity. So let's say this student is Hispanic. His race code is not missing. And then ethnicity missing indicator is no. And then let's say the student is Hispanic. So essentially, he's white based on federal requirements. Don't ask us why, but based on federal definition, anyone who emanated from Europe, Hispanic, is white. And so if there are mixed races, if the student has a mixed race, then just populate the closest one here. And then of course, part of, if you did not submit your SINF for this student, another error that will trigger would be your SINF 453, which I believe triggers for the same student. There is a 453 here. So you might as well shoot two birds with one stone and populate the parent ed level code. Okay. So the student is, let's just say the student is not a high school graduate. And just to hint on this, what so where is the student qualified for SED if he's not a high school graduate based on the subgroups I related earlier? So that's 14. And then you also have to populate the residential address or even the mailing address if you have optional address you want to route your mails to. Okay. Then click on post. So currently, the CDDs for fall 1 is still in development. There are some bugs that was detected during testing. And so they are working on that right now. And so it doesn't make sense to deploy it and have you guys suffer those things. So we're currently holding off on deploying the CDDs for now. And so that's why there's a delay. Okay. Okay, so let's just assume you have resolved that. And so now you just have to wait for a new snapshot for the error to clear for CERT 4. Okay. So another one is CERT 67. CERT 67 is saying you have a ELAS record. You don't have a ELAS record for the student in CalPads. So this is simple. If you did not submit a TBD record for the student or a EO, then of course on census day, if there are no EL statuses for a student with a date on or before census day, then it would trigger this error. So we go to, again, if SILA 67, it goes to the CER 67 error. I think this would trigger an issue because it wasn't linked properly, of course. Let's just type your fault. So for CER 67, it's saying just make sure that there is a SILA data with the status on or before census day. Okay. So for this, you have to go to the SILA status of the student, and the student does not have a status reported. So again, if you have a gazillion of these errors, that means your SILA hasn't posted yet in CalPAS, or the SILA that you were expecting to post had rejected records. And so you have to clear those, resubmit the file, and make sure everything goes through. Okay. So those are common errors for SILA. Let's move. So CERT 112 is just stating that you did not exit your enrollment last year. This is just a rare occasion wherein either you the students were exited in end of year, however you made changes and left the enrollment record open while making those changes. And with that, and also another scenario is if the exit date of that enrollment overlap the current academic year. Because the rule of thumb is the exit date of a student record should be on or before 8/15 the current year. So let's say this was 9/6/2021. This should have been exited before 8/15, on or before 8/15/2022. Now, if this record overlapped 8/16, then of course that will cause an issue in CalPADS. So that's CERT 1 So the bottom line here is that you have to know the errors, you have to know the resource to look for with regards to resolving errors. If it's a business process, then of course it's way beyond just looking at your error list or error page in CalPads. You have to go to the CalPads data guide for any business rules. You have to go to the valid code combinations for the valid codes for specific information, especially if you're resolving CDDs. You also have to go to, you may want to go to the here. If you have students with SPED errors, saying, hey, you're getting a cert 140, you're saying that the student is receiving ISP services. However, we don't see a private school enrollment in CalPads, then you then have to go here and in the student reporting data for students with disabilities and refer to this matrix in terms of what primary enrollment to report for your scenario. Okay. There is also our old reliable Flash 161. Let's see here. If you just Google pads Flash 161, which is the original Flash that introduces PED reporting in CalPad. So all of these are here. And then you have this section here. Okay. So you have this. You can refer to this as well. So if you're getting Cert 142, Cert 140, or any of those PED related certification errors, you could refer to either this, the table, and also the SPED FAQ by just researching on CalPads FAQ. Okay. So we can't just offer you all of these steps. It's more important for you to know where to locate the resources, okay, that would guide you in all of this. You can view the certification error pages, videos. You can look at the user manual certification page, or you can even go the old school and just go to and download the actual CalPads error list if you want to be able to, you're more comfortable with a spreadsheet and resolve and looking at spreadsheet data. So you could download that anywhere. So that is basically how to resolve errors. And then you also have your SENR 519, right? Again, you have to look at the error page and then resolve the error based on the suggested resolution. So the only difference with resolving CDDs and certs is that we would suggest you first resolve CDDs because this is essentially data population still. Okay, resolve CDDs first. The CDDs will clear before the certs. So because sometimes if you resolve CDDs first, chances are it would also resolve some cert errors in the process. Okay, so resolve CDDs first before resolving cert errors. And of course, cert 1, send us a ticket as soon as if you see this error. Okay, send us a ticket if you want your school to be excluded from the expected open school for fall 1. Okay, okay, so assuming you've resolved all of the errors, and of course you have to wait for CalPAS to run a snapshot revision and bring down your errors to 0. Okay. So now that you've brought down your errors to 0, you now have to go here to reports and review each of the reports. And then once those are reviewed, it then allows you to click on the box that should appear here and click on LA Approve button. So on December 16 or 17, which is the initial deadline, we only expect you to be on LEA approved. Now, if you want to be extra and finish up your Fall 1 certification, we also would like you to, you can, you're welcome to request your SELPA to approve your SELPA version as well and be done with Fall 1 and move on to Fall 2. Okay?
Hold on, Kyron.
Yes, sir.
I didn't catch what you said, but I just want to make sure it's clear. I think it was your example. Hispanic and race is what's being discussed, and
Uh-huh.
Hispanic is the ethnicity. I put the federal definitions, which is what CalPADs use. But
Mm-hmm.
the combination of race doesn't have to be just 700 white. It could be white or it cannot be white. It could be just 100. It could be a combination of 7 and 100. It could be a combination of 7, 100, and 600, which is
Yeah.
Afro origin. So, I mean, at this day and age, you can have people who identify as Hispanic, but their origins might be from Asia, right? So, just just want to clarify that that was just the example, and I don't think Kyron was trying to specifically say Hispanic equals white as the race. It's whatever they put down, or it could be no race. They can be identify as
Yeah, you
Hispanic
can just,
and not put a race at all.
yeah, or if a parent feels offended that we're profiling them, you can just, part of your questionnaire should also have, say, be decline to state race. That
I
way,
I have a question specifically for you, Kyron.
yes. Okay. We're Asian. We're not Pacific.
Yeah, darn it, darn it.
Filipinos are Asian. The reason why there's confusion between Pacific Islanders that there are Filipinos who grew up, who migrated to Hawaii, and now all of those Filipinos who are basically growing up in Hawaii tend to, they're Pacific Islanders if they want to be that way. But then if they want to reflect a Filipino race, we're Asian. But again, of course, that
His based on the Spanish culture, would you be Hispanic?
well, that's culture though. It this is
I, he's
yeah.
all jammed up.
So anyway, again, because of that r- confusion, unfortunately, we basically helped them out and had a specific one for Filipino here. But normally, our ethnicity is Asian. Yeah. Sorry for that segue. Anyway, so where were we? Oh yeah, for once you have certification here, resolve this, and then of course, once it's zero and you're zero, then you're ready, right? To press that approve button. Now the approve button will then notify yourself. So if I am a SELPA, let me just switch here to a SELPA. Let's see here. El Dorado County Charter for all of our SELPA charter schools. So El Dorado County Charter has a lot of, what happened there? Okay. So El Dorado County Charter has has a lot of to to approve for SELPA approval, right? So it is important for you if you are part of, let's say, a SELPA that has a lot of LEAs under them. It's important to be first in line, right? Don't wait till the deadline, or at least notify yourself that you're working on your data. That way they have their own timetable. And so on the SELPA side, once they get the notification, or once they closely monitor this side of the approval, they should be able to see your status here. Okay, you have here approved, not certified. So all of those. You would sometimes, if you do an LEA approved, it should just be revision status would say LEA approved. And then that's when they can just do a mass update and just do a certify for all of those other schools. But that doesn't make sense, right? If you, the SELPA should look at the reports. So they scroll here to the bottom and look at the reports here. Okay. So if I am a SELPA and I click on 16.1, I have to by default, CalPAS will by default should show a drop down of the academic year, and the SELPA will have to choose the LEA, right? If let's say you've already LEA approved and you made sure, but then you or SELPA approved, but then your SELPA said that, hey, this student should be added in, so you need to make corrections, right? So when you make corrections in CalPAS and you have a new revised uncertified version, copy the revision ID in your email and notify yourself. Because if your SELPA just goes here and looks for, okay, ACE Charter, let's just see here, ACE Charter, right? And then, and tell them your status. So you're in LE approved, right? You're currently LE approved. So if you want them to see your updated, revised, and certified, tell them the revision ID. That way they can go here, do a revised and certified, and click on review report. Now, if the report that they're looking at has the same revision ID as the one that you want them to check, then that's well and good. Now, if you just tell them, okay, I made a revision, or maybe I'm in, see here, this is an underappreciated function of CalPads. You always have to look at the revision ID when making sure that you're communicating with yourself and if they're looking at the correct data. Otherwise, you'll just be going back and forth through your email with arguing discrepancy on your reports. So when you send any corrections, any request to yourself, always make sure you tell them the revised and what status. It could be in review, it could be LA approved, it could be unrevised, revised and certified, and include the revision ID of that snapshot that you want them to check. Okay? So that's just a tip that you guys should be aware of. So now that your SELPA approved the data, then of course you're now fall to certified. Okay? So however, that's just a process. Now, part of critical thinking and analysis is looking at the reports, making sure you know where the counts came from, and of course, looking why some of your students are not on the report. So you need to learn the business rules, you need to know the specs of each report. And as a segue, and this is just a segue to Nate coming in and sharing the reports guides on CalPads, which he will review for fall one. Okay? So make sure that you know where to look at, what to refer to, and the different documents as well that you could refer to. So,
Yeah,
right.
Karen, I was looking up. I think we missed. Sarah asked about a CERT 146 earlier, and
What's the CERT 146? Let's see here.
missing a lit program. I think EL student. The
Yeah.
you have shouldn't cause the problem. I don't know if that record might have been closed or if it's not at the same school the students enrolled at.
Mhm.
But I did check the code sets, and the start date for the lit programs went all the way back to like 1990.
Mhm.
Even though they, sometimes codes have a starting date from when they're implemented in CalPads, but they wanted to catch all the existing students, so the code is effective at that date, so that's not a
Yeah.
problem. So if you're sure that the lit program is in CalPads and has an overlapping, it's at the same school of enrollment, submit a ticket, Sarah, and we'll look into that. Doesn't sound from what you're describing that CERT 146 should trigger, but without looking at it in CalPads, we can't be sure to the reasoning or if it's actually legitimate.
And I also had an issue yesterday where it was just timing. So maybe check if you have a new snapshot as well. Because sometimes you probably added your data in, but it was later and was not captured during the snapshot.